Hi, folks. I've got some good news and I've got some better news. The good news is there's better news, and the better news is that I am talking to Eliza Hardy Jones today. Ha ha ha. This is also a historic mile marker for the podcast, and it's my first time interviewing a female guest. I feel a little bit weird about that because, I have a lot of female friends, and it just happens that I was interviewing a lot of dudes. So I'm really excited a lot to talk to Eliza here today. So I've known Eliza. I knew Eliza as Eliza Hardy, and probably right before I left Philadelphia, around 2003 is when I met her, 2002, something like that. And then subsequent years, she married one of my best buddies, Andrew Jones, hence the Hardy Jones. I was at their wedding. But I digress. Eliza is an extraordinary musician, a gorgeous voice. Yeah, amazing musician, gorgeous voice. And her quilting work that she does and her art is breathtaking. So some of the stuff that you're going to hear about on the show, you're going to have to go and look up to see some of the visual things. I want you to do that. That's important. This is an audio recording, but it needs visual stimulation. So you're going to do that. That's your promise. Pinky swear right now. Okay, great. It's like a cyber pinky swear. I'm sure there's some weird app out there that does that. But maybe we could develop one called Pinky Swear and make a whole bunch of money, or someone will just steal the idea right now. Okay, here we go. Eliza Hardy Jones, enjoy yourself.
All my friends till the very end, thank you for the fun and the play. Until next time, I hope you all do fine. Live to see another day. My pals.
Wow, that's it. That is officially recording. It's just all we are ever is just a hairpin away from going on the record and just not. And to be able to just free ourselves from having this indelibly etched into people's hearts and minds. I'm glad we're going to do that, though, because I'm talking to you now, Eliza.
Hi, Brad. Good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you. I'm so happy to see you here.
I'm happy to see you here.
Yeah. It's great. I was, for a little bit, I was thinking for this show, am I going to be doing the live video that accompanies it? People, if you want to go watch it and online, but I decided not to, because then I feel more pressure to, have a better, even just a background rather than my dirty clothes hanging up behind me.
Yeah. I've always have like the big backlit shadow for my Zoom. I don't like the recorded Zoom video. Then I have to
Yeah.
I can't wear the sweatshirt.
Yeah. You got to get like ring lights and have everything, studio set up. We don't need to do that. So then they just get to hear our voices, and that's fine. It sounds nice for them to listen to.
We're voice pros, you and I.
We are. Yes. Yeah, you actually have, I forget that you are, well, I want to start with this because I totally forgot. I wouldn't have brought this up for the show, but you are officially the Pennsylvania Lottery jingle master.
I sing the Pennsylvania Lottery jingle. It was a wild. I got a call. There's like a studio in Philadelphia that mostly does post-production work, but I had a friend of mine made a record there and I had done some singing. So the producer called me and he was like, "Hey, do you work on spec?" And I was like, "I guess." And he was like, "Come in, we're going to record a commercial. If they pick the commercial up, you'll get paid. If they don't pick the commercial up, they won't get paid, but it'll be like a half an hour." And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll come in." And it was the Pennsylvania Lottery theme song. It's the same song, but they re-recorded it to be like rock and roller. Like,
yeah, you did a great job. I've heard it many times. You do it. And I remember the old one growing up. You know, it's for people that want to listen, check it out. You can hear listen to the new one. Then maybe you can go back and listen to like an 80s version or something, because that was pretty much
yeah.
the same
Yeah,
thing.
it ran. I mean, that was sort of the fun of this one, is that the old one ran for 12 years.
Yes.
So I'm going for 12. I want to see 12 years of royalties.
I want to see 20 or more years of royalties for you. And, you know, for people that don't know about the royalty game and the business, you do one thing in the commercial world, and if it runs over and over again for however long, as long as you don't sign off in perpetuity or just, you know, a one lump sum, then, you know, you get royalties. And that can be once a year that you get a chunk. And and it's great. It's my friend referred to it as mailbox money.
Mailbox money, yeah.
And you see the envelope, you're like, "Ooh, I know what that is." And and it's great. It's great. I mean, that's so cool. That's why I love commercials. I love doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Previously, I had done a bunch of radio commercials for the sports talk radio station.
You did.
But I didn't get paid for any of those.
Oh, what? Well, I didn't know you did that. What?
Well, we had a friend, Charlotte, who was like an ad rep for WIP for a long time.
Okay.
And she would sort of call me in for the like, "Listen, we had somebody come in and do it." Like, essentially I was a scab, but I didn't know I was a scab. And I wasn't really a scab. They had paid a union person. It's a union station. So they had like paid a union person to do it. But then whoever the company was like didn't like the reading. So then I would come in and re-record it. But because I wasn't union, so it was like I was doing our friend Charlotte a favor. And it was fun. Like I'd go in and be like,
"Yeah.
Do you need new running shoes?"
I know your feet are extra sweaty.
Yeah.
There
was one ad for a lingerie store, and the woman who had originally read the ad had a very thick Philadelphia accent, which is not the sexiest accent. So like the original ad was like, "Come on down to the lingerie shop and get yourself some lace." It was really gravelly and aggressive, like, "Do you need a new push-up bra?" So I wish they had just run that.
Oh, that would have been.
I feel like if you were a woman listening to sports talk radio and just like a very powerful woman was like, "We got thongs." You know, I'd be like, "This woman is speaking to me. She's speaking to me.
She's talking my language. She's a straight shooter. She's telling me what it is to be sexy, straight up." That is great, though. It's kind of like you did those and it was kind of like, you know, you get your legs from that, and then you got the Pennsylvania Lottery. It's all worth it.
It was all worth it. Yeah.
I kind of similarly, you know, with my whole like, I got that stock photo that came up everywhere all around the world, and then it was like, got paid nothing. And then when I started actually doing some commercial work, I felt like that was a part of, you know, by doing that, this allowed this other thing to happen. But so that is so cool, man. I hope you get more stuff like that too. If you know, I know it's not something. It's a whole business in itself. Of just really
it's such a different business. Like after the last thing, I was like, I want to do more of these, and I was like, oh, it's hard. You have to like, it's a whole. It's super competitive. Like I was so lucky to have just been in that studio, so I was on this guy's mind, and to be like, "Yo, I'll come in tomorrow," like whatever, you know, to be so casual about it.
Yeah.
is so rare. Now, when I looked more into doing it, I was like, oh God, like,
It's
am I ready to be this?
dude,
person? Like,
it's daunting. It's like a whole thing. Yeah,
yeah,
the voiceover world.
yeah. And my voice is not that special. You have a really special voice. My voice is just like generic lady voice.
There's nothing wrong about that. I think you have a beautiful voice, and so like sing, for doing like well, yeah, I imagine doing like jingles, how well that would come across, and doing like musical jingles or whatever, commercials for those. But and again, it's a lot of just who you know. It's totally how the business is. We'll get into a little.
It's always who you know.
It is. It's just like, it's so cliche, but it's true. It's like you could have all the talent in the world, and then you just like, if you just don't know that one person, right time, right place, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So well, that's cool. I'm glad we started off on that. I would have forgot, but it's great. We got that one in. So everyone check that out, Pennsylvania Lottery, and with the spokesman for Pennsylvania, isn't it? It's a groundhog, right? He's like.
Yeah, but those are different campaigns.
That's like the scratch offs.
The scratch offs. I just sing it's the theme song for when they draw the Powerball numbers.
I love the Powerballs. I used to love when the air pops the ball.
So it's like after Jeopardy, they pull the numbers, you hear me sing.
Oh, it's so good.
There's a guy singing too. I forget his name, and he's the one who like arranged it. I should know his name. He like did all the rock and roll guitars, but then they needed that. They needed that lady lift. They pulled me in.
Lady luck.
Everybody needs a lady around.
Yes, that is true.
That's what the world forgets. You need that lady lift.
And so when I was talking to you before we started recording, you're my first female guest on the show, which is really kind of silly that I haven't, had a female. It's just I was telling you I don't want it to be like a dude party or something, or I say sausage podcast. It is not going to be that. I promise. I vow.
Yeah. Make that pledge to yourself.
I'm making that pledge right
to the
now.
World.
I will call myself and leave myself a voice memo. But I'm super happy. You are in Philadelphia right now. Mm-hmm. You live in West Philadelphia. Got a beautiful house. I've been there many times when I visit, and I got to see a bunch last summer when we were home visiting, and I want to just kind of hear a little bit about your history as far as just where you're from, what that was like, where you grew up, what was it like growing up as a human being?
Well, I'm from here.
Yes.
I grew up on 63rd Street in Philadelphia until I was 6th grade. And then my mom actually lost her vision, so she had to quit her job.
She did?
And she did. It's back. She had surgery to correct it. But she'd actually had a traumatic injury as a kid.
Oh, wow.
They say like, if someone's going to get an eye poked out, that happened to my mom. So she was like chasing her friend, and he threw a stick at her, and it poked her in the eyeball.
Oh my God.
So she lost vision she lost the vision in the injured eye, and then went sympathetically blind in the good eye for like 6 or 7 months when she was about 6 years old. Then got the vision back in both eyes. But then when I was a kid, the injured eye just got worse and worse. So she had like sort of lost that vision. So she had to quit. She went to the Chubb Institute of Technology.
No way. Oh,
she
man.
totally did. This is for those of any listeners who grew up in the sort of Philadelphia, New Jersey zone. You remember the Chubb Institute of Technology.
Every day the commercials coming on. Oh man, I love those.
Yeah. When my parents were first married, my dad went back to college. So like when my brother and I were born, my dad was a college student, and my mom, she just like needed a good job that was going to support like, a husband in college and 2 little kids. And so she went to the Chubb Institute of Technology and got a computer programmer's degree. And it was like all in zeros and ones. It was totally like super old school because it's the 80s.
Yes.
And she worked in Center City, and we lived in Overbrook. But losing the vision, she had to quit that job. My dad had then finished his degree, got a job as a professor at Westchester University.
Yeah, my
Your
alma
alma
mater. A
mater.
little like went there a year.
Yeah, a little dipped in.
I dipped.
So we moved out to Westchester when I was in like 6th grade.
Okay.
And then I grew up there for a while. My parents were super fun. Growing up was, different, I think, than other people's families.
How how was it different? What would you say is different? Because
Well, so my mom is like a real seeker. So my mom loves to devote herself to different religions, different spiritual practices, different careers. So like she had her undergrad degree in neurobiology, and then she went to Chubb Institute. And then when I was growing up, she spent a lot of time at Kripalu, the ashram in Massachusetts, and was like a very serious practitioner of yoga. And like, I'd wake up in the morning and my mom would have like her water bowls and she'd be toning and doing meditations, and like major family decisions were determined by tarot card readings or the I Ching. So it's like very, and I think now a lot of that stuff has become pretty mainstream, where it's like, oh yeah, everybody gets their tarot card readings, and like yoga is this, widely accepted modality of wellness. But when I was growing up, people were like, what is happening in your house? And we would my parents didn't have a ton of money when we were growing up. And so the one sort of like vacation we would do is we would go to the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies. And my mom would, study whatever, like toning with Angela Starion, or she would get her angel certification, or, that was really different from other kids in the 80s.
Yeah, in the 80s, and especially like East Coast. You know, that's a totally different world. Like that wasn't very prevalent.
Yes.
There was like no yoga studios then. I mean, I don't think there was nothing.
No, like my mom taught yoga teacher certifications because she was the only one, like it was amazing. Like she taught yoga out of our house. And there was when we moved to Westchester, there was a small yoga studio in Westchester, and she taught some classes there and some certifications there. But I mean, that was kind of her, after she quit being a computer programmer, she did that for, 15 years until she went back to school to continue her many studies. Yeah. So that's my mom. And then my dad is just like the child of a super bohemian art family.
Wow.
So, everybody plays music and paints and sings songs. And like, we'd go to visit my grandmother and she'd be like, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I signed us up to teach a gypsy dance class at the Richmond Public School today. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? What, like, you don't know anything about, you're making this up. You're making gypsy. And I know that gypsy is no longer the appropriate term, but we're talking about my grandmother. And she'd be like, nobody knows what gypsy dance is, just dance with them, We would teach ukulele lessons to kids. Like my grandmother was a total scam artist, but only in that she scammed her way into public schools to bring arts education to kids.
That is skillful means.
It's totally amazing. When she died, we had a sort of remembrance service for her, and people came and shared stories about her life. And this one woman stood up, and I had never met her before. And she told this amazing story. So for a long time, my grandmother lived in Buckingham County, Virginia, in a place that she called Wilderness. It was just literally a shack in the woods.
Wow.
And so she would talk about wilderness. And she was like, again, like a super wild bohemian. And she went to like a poetry reading that they were having in Buckingham. And this woman was like, and Mary stood up and she started improvising violin under everybody's poems. And she and I just became best friends. And she decided that she wanted to start a violin program for the elementary school in that county. And so she had this other woman call up the school supervisor or the principal and say that she was the like public school superintendent, and that they were required to have a music program. And then the next day, my grandmother showed up at the school and was like, "I'd like to offer my services as a music teacher."
Wow.
So they like, but again, like, it's not like she scammed her way into like making thousands of dollars. Like, I'm sure she was just like, and you can pay me $10 and I'll bring music to the children, you know, like she was just a passionate weirdo.
That's awesome. That is so great. It's like a really genuine giving scam artist.
Yes.
Like
that,
for the
yes.
benefit of art and music. I mean, geez, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. She just truly believed that like you could say yes to anything, that you were always qualified.
Yes.
And that like, that everybody deserves music. And that like whatever she had to do to like bring music to the world, she was totally all about it.
That's beautiful.
It is.
Really sweet. My
yeah.
gosh.
Super sweet. So that was like, growing up was a lot of like going to grandma's and playing music. And like, or like I lived with her for a couple of months when I was in high school to like teach piano at her music school, which was just like, she taught kids out of her house.
Yeah.
And she would be like, "You got to teach this guy guitar." And I'd be like, "I don't know guitar." And she'd be like, "You do now." And I'd be like, "I don't know what that means." "You do now." "I literally don't know." And she's like, "You know more than he does. You're teaching this man guitar." And I was like, "Oh God, Grandma."
Oh, so this is a very musical family from that side. And your dad, I know, mandolin player.
Yeah, mandolin player, old time musician. Yeah, my dad's family is super musical. His mother and father met in a pit orchestra.
Oh.
Yeah. So my grandmother was like 19 and playing violin, and my grandfather was, I think, 40. He was fairly old, you know, much older than her, and played clarinet. It was like an amateur, like a summer Shakespeare, or maybe it was like a Gilbert and Sullivan troupe or something. It was something like that, like a summer, like Gilbert and Sullivan thing. And they met there, and he caught her eye with his clarinet playing. His woodwind got her. His woodwind, yeah. He was, you know, shaking his clarinet in her direction.
Full hard woodwind. Morning woodwind.
Yes, his morning woodwind in her direction. His sister was an opera singer. My aunt was a professional ballerina.
Oh,
so lots of musicians and artists on that side, which is
you were saturated with this as you know, as growing up with all that, and so what was like the earliest? Did you say you started playing something? Was it piano? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I very, very seriously I just wanted to be a classical pianist. That was like my goal. So I started, you know, messing around when I was little. But I think my parents started with lessons when I was 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it super seriously. I think then I taught piano for a lot of years, and you realize how most kids don't take it seriously. I could have this sense of like, yeah, music's amazing. So you just like practice all the time. You get super good at it. And I realized, oh yeah, most kids don't.
They're just playing Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah, like they want to learn the Mario Brothers theme song, and then they're like set for life.
They'll learn this. Yeah. And then after they learn that, then they'll just go play the video games instead of learning the music.
Yeah, you know, but I think there's something to that too. Like, it's beautiful to have kids have the ability to experience music without an expectation of being masterful, right? Like, you don't need to master something for it to be worthwhile.
Yeah.
But for me, I loved it. I loved classical music. I only listened to classical music until I was in high school. So I have these, like, when people talk about popular music from a certain era, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I was just listening to Rachmaninoff. I was completely
really. So you didn't. There was nothing like up until high school. It was like just classical music.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in middle school, my brother started to get like seriously into like punk music and like, you know, the alternative tentacles catalog. And so I started to be like, oh, like I get Primus, you know, like Primus is like, I understand what's happening here. Now I'm like, oh, Primus is so corny. But it made sense to my like little Mozart brain to be like, listen to that bass line.
Well, and he's got something going on there. I mean, he's quite a bass player. But...
Yeah, super tech.
Yeah, super tech. So it's fascinating though. You weren't exposed to any of that. So what was like, other than the punk, what do you remember the first like non-classical music that you were just like taken with that spoke to you?
Yeah, like my first like favorite band was a band called Alice Donut, which is not a well-known band. It's very like,
dude,
they were like a super deep cut on the Alternative Tentacles catalog, and like it's sort of disturbing music in a lot of ways. But for whatever reason, that like really caught my fancy, and then I loved the Dead Milkmen.
Oh, yes.
So like that, and then I think like
yeah.
Then in high school I started to get into like Joni Mitchell and Cat Stevens, and I started to be like, oh, music is good. Like,
yeah.
I remember my freshman year of college, my brother gave me a Neil Young record, and I was like, who is Neil Young? Oh my God. I just like was very late to everything. I think like, you know, I was just late to discover you know, popular music, but maybe even like kind of deep cut popular music.
Deep cut. But what about like the Beatles or something? That was still...
I mean, I had obviously heard the Beatles. Everybody, even kids who only listen to classical music, like I was alive.
Yeah, I was alive.
I was alive. I heard Madonna.
On.
Yeah, like I knew who Madonna was.
Yeah. Just not listening to it.
Yeah, and like I think my dad had a Sgt. Pepper's vinyl, so we would like listen to that sometimes. My dad would make these Sunday morning mixtapes, so we would listen to them on long drives.
Oh. But
it was a lot of novelty music, like Bonzo Dog Band, and like really, and then a lot of old timey, kind of like goofy old timey songs, and then also Paul Simon. He just loved Paul Simon. Dan Hicks and his Hot Licks made it. A lot of like early Dr. John stuff made it on there. So it's like weird for me where I'm like, yeah, I didn't know anything about music, but then I like knew all these like real deep cut.
Yeah, like kind of rare. If most people don't even know that now. They're like, who's that?
Yeah. Like my dad's favorite band was the Holy Modal Rounders.
Yes.
Which are like a freak folk old time band.
Like I think I just heard of them like a few years ago. I don't think I actually like ever listened to them, but
they're great.
Yeah,
super great.
They are. I like
timeless.
Them. Yes. Yeah. That's funny. Oh my gosh. And at this point you were also, was this when you were in Quaker meeting school? Like, did you go through, just for folks that know if they know what Quaker, I'm guessing there's going to be people that don't know what that is.
Yeah. I think folks around Philadelphia know what it is because Philly is a Quaker settlement.
Yeah. I just learned that this summer more where I'm from in Haddonfield. It was Quaker based on Quaker settlement. So it's, Yeah, but I think outside of the zone, it's maybe not quite as popular. So the Quakers are a Christian sect, but they believe that everybody has the light of God within them. So like God lives in everybody, which means that nobody can interpret a relationship to God, because like you don't need a minister or a priest or an elder to communicate to God for you. So when you go to a Quaker meeting, there is no minister, there's no sermon. You just sit in silence and you meditate on that light. You meditate on the divine. And if you are moved to speak, and the idea is not that you wouldn't like think of something cool to say and then say it, but that like you have to be truly spiritually moved, that you cannot keep it inside, that you then stand up and you share what you've been reflecting on. Yeah.
And then you just sit back down, everybody sits in silence. And so you could have an entire Quaker meeting where just the entire hour is silent, nobody says anything. And then you can have other meetings, people call them popcorn meetings, where like somebody shares something, or there might even just be something going on in the world or in your community that is like setting people off. So you might have a meeting where like people are just popping up. Because mine was in high school, I went to a Quaker high school, so we had meetings. There was not a lot of religious specific, I think a lot of like spiritual, we were really asked to use it as a time for like deep introspection and spiritual introspection. So people weren't just like complaining about the dean when they stood up. It was meant to be a time for deeper reflection. But I remember the first time I went to the Luddite Congress in Ohio in the 90s. So there's like this, they called it so the initial Luddite Congress was like, Industrial Revolution. The Luddites got together, they were anti-technology, and they like blew up factories. And then they all died and there were no more Luddites.
I never knew that. I know the term Luddite because people are like, oh, you're a Luddite, because they're like, you still have a flip phone or whatever. But
yes. So in the mid 90s, they called it the Second Luddite Congress, and it was in rural Ohio, and it was led by a group of plain Quakers. So plain Quakers are people who take those Quaker principles and live really simply, almost like the Amish. Like they only wear plain clothes. They do not have any technology. So it's like this very old-fashioned way of operating in the world. And so it was these sort of like Amish folks and plain Quaker folks. Wendell Berry was there, which is so amazing that like at the time, I was probably 16, so didn't realize like how amazing it was to like have had this time with Wendell Berry.
Wow.
But people just spoke and talked about, because the 90s is sort of this like coming of a new technological revolution.
So that was it was due to like probably like here's internet.
People sort of talking about like rejecting that movement. And I like was super into it at the time, but we had a Quaker meeting at the end of that Luddite Congress, and people kept standing up and talking about Jesus. And I was like, why is everybody talking about Jesus? Like I was totally like, that's not what this is for. And then I was like, oh no, right. Yeah, it is technically a Christian religion. And these like super old fashioned Quakers are definitely using this as a time to like think about their savior, the Lord Christ, But for me, I was like, who talks about Jesus?
We don't do that at school. That's fascinating. I wish they had. I'd like to say I wish they had blown up the internet, but I don't know. We'll see.
No,
see.
I felt like for the rest of my high school, I hand wrote all my papers. I did not I didn't have an email address. I didn't go on the internet. Like I totally embraced it. And then in college, I was just like, oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I know. It's just
like it makes sense to type your papers. It really does.
Yes. It's not that big a deal. Maybe don't be on internet porn for 8 hours a day.
Yes.
But we could type our papers now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Try to but now I feel like being a touring musician, the internet keeps me connected. I feel the ability to like have a cell phone and call home. Yeah. And or to FaceTime home and see my lovely husband, all of that stuff is a beautiful thing about technology.
It is. It's hard to imagine like what that was like before, because obviously people were touring, and how was that? What would happen?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like waiting for the payphone.
Yeah. Wait for the payphone. And then you just don't see the person for a long time. And it is kind of tough. So there's wonderful things about it, and us getting to do this,
Yeah, totally.
So through high school, Quaker meeting, and then you went into college, Vassar, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I had applied to a bunch of like dual programs with conservatories. And then just like right before my auditions, I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a classical pianist. I want to get like a practical degree. Like being a musician is crazy. And like no one gets to be a musician. Like you have to get a practical degree. So I got the very practical Latin American studies degree.
Yes. Yeah. That's practical.
So practical.
Everyone needs that in their daily. Yeah. You need food, water, sleep, and the Latin America.
And just like a really deep understanding of the history of Latin American politics and literature and music, you know, really important.
Yes. Yes.
But I am so glad I did that. I still studied both organ and piano. Vassar has an excellent music department. So it's not like I stopped playing music. That was still a major part of my studies, but my degree was in Latin American studies. But it meant that like I spent 6 months in Peru and 7 months in Mexico, and I went to Cuba, and, you know, like all this stuff that essentially I got to do with financial aid because I was a financial aid kid. So
yeah.
I got to,
Yay for financial aid.
Yeah, I got to like have all of these amazing, and I got to go to Cuba in 2000 before Cuba was open. So there was.
What was all that like? Like, what do you remember from the travels in those areas, or just Cuba? You know.
Cuba was like sort of the least fun of them all because everything had to be like sanctioned by both state departments. And I had just spent a year living in Peru and Mexico. And so then I was like, oh, cool. Like I'll get to go to Cuba. And it was just a 2-week trip, but it was like, we're going to put you on this tour bus and we're going to drive through a neighborhood, but you can't get off the bus. You can't talk to any Cubans. And I was like, this is lame. So I would sneak out at night and go dancing.
Oh, cool.
Which was very, very fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad I went. Cuba at that time was really, really fascinating. It was a really interesting place to be. And the focus of my research that I did there was on public art, and that the public art scene in Cuba was very, very cool.
Murals and like
lots and lots of murals. And like they have billboards like we do, but because it's especially at that time was like a truly communist, you know, you're not like marketing products, you're essentially marketing ideologies. So as you drive down the road, you have, you know, beautiful like graphic representations of like Marx and Che like high-fiving, or lots of anti-US imperialism art. And it was the spring after 9/11. So there was some like pretty provocative 9/11 related things going on, which was interesting.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, it was an interesting trip, but not in Peru, I really had sort of a wild and unique experience. In Cuba, it was like, I went on an official educational
sanctioned
official
trip. A little dancing.
Yeah.
What about Peru then? What was amazing about that?
So in Peru, like in college, you can like enroll in these study abroad programs. I didn't actually enroll in a program. I just enrolled in university in Lima at the Pontificia. So it's like the Catholic University in Lima. I just enrolled, and they had sort of an exchange student program where you would live with a family. But when I got to my family's house, I was actually just living on an apartment above their house, and there was another American woman there. And she was United Pentecostal. So United Pentecostal folks are like speak in tongues, go to church for like 8 hours a week. It's 4 hours on Wednesday, 4 hours on Sunday. She wasn't allowed to cut her hair. She wasn't allowed to dance. She wasn't allowed to wear skirts. And this was sort of like her chance to just sort of like try some things out, because she had sort of flown the nest. There's a large United Pentecostal community in Lima, which is why she had been allowed to go there. And so she was still going to her church things, but like I was getting her to go dancing with me. And I think because she had grown up in such a wildly sheltered world, like there was no, I think both of us were in this really great position of like, somebody told us, like somebody invited us to go do it. Let's just go do it. Like, let's ride on the top of a bus to the Rock of Humanity and like hike up to the top of this mountain so that the moon is casting shadows on the stone where we can see the alien carvings that were left there by ancient man.
Yes.
But it's like we're with strangers. We're just like, I think both of us were so willing to take all kinds of adventures. I ended up actually dropping out. She kept going to her classes. I just dropped out and I joined an African dance like troupe. And I took flamenco classes. Wow. And then we just like, so basically like I just danced and I took Criolla cultures, like the sort of Afro-Peruvian culture. I took Criolla guitar lessons. I learned a bunch of like cool Criolla songs. And then we went to the Amazon. We hiked the Inca Trail. We went to Machu Picchu. We saw the Nazca lines from an airplane. Oh. We went to the Rock of Humanity. Like we just were really... It was amazing. I remember calling home and telling my dad, like, Dad, I'm going to drop out of school. But don't worry, because I've already signed up for these flamenco classes. And like, we're going to go to the Amazon next week. And my dad's reaction was like, don't tell your mother. Like, I won't. I promise. So that, it was just really fun. You know, it was such a new... experience. You know, I was young. I think I was 20.
Yeah.
But also like when you're 20, you do have that like brain disease where you feel invincible.
Yes.
But in this way, that was great. Cause like, you know, we went to the Amazon and just like got off we went to Iquitos, and then Iquitos is where people go to take ayahuasca, which we didn't know.
Was that happening back then?
Oh my God.
So big?
Yes.
Interesting.
So there were all of these lodges so you fly into Iquitos, and then you as soon as you get out of the airport, you're just sort of swarmed by people bargaining with you to book a lodge.
Wow.
And a lot of those lodges are ayahuasca lodges.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not want to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, I am not going downriver. But we ended up like negotiating with some guy I think we paid him $80 to take me and Crystal 50 miles down the river, and we stayed in a lodge. It was just us. We were the only two people there.
Whoa.
And it was 5 days. So it was like this, like our food was included. We had this little kid. He was like a 12-year-old named Armand, and he would like take us out in the boat. We'd see the piranhas and the dolphins. And it was just like, it was really cool. It was very, very fun.
That's amazing.
When I came back to Iquitos, we had dinner with these two men, because again, I was invincible. And this guy asked me to go with him to his lodge downriver because he was a tiger and I was a lion and we were meant to be together. Then we were going to get married. And like part of me was like, I need to say yes to this. Like I need to go downriver. I am a tiger. But then also in my head, I was like, if I do that, like I will have to have sex with him. And I don't want to do that. Like not interested in this guy. So I was just like, listen, I have a really important dance performance with my troupe that I'm part of, my African dance troupe that I joined. So I was like, I'm not going downriver with you.
Yeah.
Went to the airport in the morning.
Going upriver.
So we go to the airport, and the airport's tiny. It's like one of those, like the plane parks and you walk up to the plane up the tiny little staircase.
Little jumpers.
Little puddle jumpers. So we get in, Crystal gives the woman her passport. She's like, okay, Crystal, you're good. And then I give her my passport and she looks at me and she goes, oh no, you canceled your ticket. And I was like, no, I didn't cancel my ticket. And she looks at her, she goes, yeah. Your uncle called and canceled your ticket. Oh. And I was like, I do not have an uncle.
What?
That was not my uncle. And then she looked at me and she goes, did you give somebody your hair? And I was like, no. And all of a sudden, El Tigre, my little tiger guy, shows up, throws me over his shoulder, carries me out to this like little grassy area underneath a tree, because it's all like outdoors, and takes out this portfolio of poetry and like illustrations he's done to prove to me that he has the soul of an artist. And I was like, what is happening? The security guard comes over and he's like, do you want to stay with him or do you want to get on the airplane? And I was like, I want to get on the airplane. Like, I am not staying in a even though he's a poet. So I get on the airplane and the flight attendant's like, he took your phone. That's what happened. And I was like, what do you mean?
Wait, what happened?
Oh,
Sorry,
I think you're frozen. Am I frozen?
It broke up for 1 sec. What was? Hold on 1 sec. So he went. So sorry, it cut out for a sec. The security guard comes over. He says, "Do you want to stay with him, or do you want to go on the plane?"
Yeah. He says, "Do you want to stay with him? Or do you want to go on the plane?" I look at the security guard and, like, with as much expression as I can muster, say, like, I want to get on the plane. Like, please take me away from El Tigre. So we go onto the plane and the flight attendant explains to me that I'm going to take it down. Okay. So the security guard tells me, like, takes me then to go back onto the plane. And the flight attendant explains to me that this man who had just kidnapped me to read me his poetry must have taken my hair to a shaman and then had worked with the shaman to then cancel my flight and know where I was and know what my flight. She had this, like, really elaborate thing about how, like, a shaman had cast a spell on me.
Whoa.
Which is interesting because I'm sure it's just that he called the airport and he was like, when is the one flight where this girl, and he, like, knew my name, was like, I'm her uncle, cancel her flight. And they were like, okay, like, there's
right.
no.
Yeah, not too mystical there.
It's not too mystical, but I love the idea that what actually happened was that he stole my hair, took it to a shaman, kidnapped me, and read me his poetry.
That's amazing. In an alternate universe,
yes,
you two are in the.
we're still downriver, just, like, living the most romantic life you can imagine.
Shape shifting into tigers and jaguars together. Wow,
it's fun.
That's a pretty big one. So that's Peru.
That's Peru. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
When you got, it's so funny, the ayahuasca thing, just, like, I didn't think, obviously the culture, they've been doing it for, thousands of years, but
yeah,
now there's, like, the tourism that's involved, but I guess it was still happening then. It's just
and I think especially because Crystal is also a white lady, because we were just, like, two 20-year-old white ladies getting off this airplane, I think the assumption was that we were only there for ayahuasca. So it was once we sort of weeded out the, like, we're not going to an ayahuasca lodge, there was, like, two dudes left over being like, all right, come to our place.
Yeah, we'll have some stuff for you. We got stuff.
Yeah, like,
ayahuasca.
We'll take you on walks through the jungle and feed you plantains. And we were like, we're in. Let's do it.
I love plantains. I love me a plantain.
Well, yeah.
So then coming back into the States, early 20s ish, and so you then started. When I want us to talk about buried beds. Like, when did you start the buried beds?
So when I graduated from college, I moved into the New Planet house on 41st and Chestnut. I had to
you're the first one who has brought that up, because actually maybe Ben Smith talked about it a little, but it's the New Planet house. Eventually,
the New Planet house.
Jesse and Justin on, and
they'll be the best guests. So the New Planet house was, at the time, it was Beaver and Justin and Jesse Moynihan and another friend of ours from high school, Ben Levitt. And they had sort of transformed it into this, just like a weird art house. It was completely falling down. I made my room out of the old art room. So I didn't have a door. It was a closet. My room had one bed in it. And above my bed was a trap door with a peephole to Justin's room.
Oh my God.
Justin would occasionally like lift up the like trap door and like talk to me while I laid in bed.
Aw.
And when I laid in bed, I had to be under like 12 blankets because there was a hole. The brick was separating, so you could like see outdoors where the bricks had separated. So it was very, very cold, but it's a great place to live.
Yes.
When I first moved in there, I had broken up with my college boyfriend and was super like brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And I just needed a place to be.
Yeah.
So it was like I think for the first month that I lived there, I just slept on the floor in the living room. And then it was like, I should just live here. Like, I'll make a room out of the closet that has the like Colin Jerome. I had painted this big mural of a cat riding a subway with a boner. Like that was my whole wall was just this subway boner cat. that was my bedroom. But yeah, so Beaver lived there. Beaver is my best friend and sort of like nursed me through my heartbreak. And then he was in a band with the Moynihan's called Hiroshima Nagasaki at the time, which was like pre New Planet Maker Rising.
Yeah.
So he was in Hiroshima Nagasaki, but had these other songs that like didn't work in that context. And he was like, oh, we should like write songs together, make some recordings together. So it really just started as like a fun way for him to have an avenue to work on songs that didn't belong in the Hiroshima Nagasaki world. And for me to like work out my broken heart and have something fun to do. Like I just was like kind of, lost at the time. So it just started as like a fun recording project. And then we were like, oh, this is good. We should do this for real. We should be a band. And so we became a band.
And at that point, were you just the two of you, or did you start to recruit like full players?
So the first EP we did was just the two of us. But then when we were like, we should be a band, it was like, okay, we're going to need a drummer and a bass player. So we brought in Tommy Bendel and Tom Mallon.
Okay.
Were the first two folks that came in. And then we added some string players, and we went through a few bass players and sort of different iterations of the band along the way. But it ended up mostly being Tom Bendel on drums, Hallie on viola, me and Beav, and then either Tom Mallon or Dave Hartley, or then just like whoever we could find for tour on bass.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Just grabbing people's. So let's listen to a little Buried Beds. This is from. Let me get this back. So I'm just gonna play this one. This is from. What era is this? This is like.
This is off of the
later.
last record. Yeah, this is off of the record In Spirit. So it was the last record we put. Last
record. Sorry, the last record.
Yeah.
Oh, geez, I feel like bad we're not going through the early catalog. But...
Nah, that's okay.
Well, let's just say, people can definitely go to it because this is on Bandcamp.
Everything's up on Bandcamp.
Everything goes on Bandcamp.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just do a little of my fade thing in. Whoops, that's the teeth. What the heck? How'd that happen? All right, here we go. Oh, okay, I know why.
A fear of rain, his tongue betrays. Wash your sins away, face the day. All you children of the sea, one single heart does beat. Your chains will fall away. Darkness grows when you're alone, but your mother lies below. She'll lift you up, electric blue and green. Men afraid, girl betrayed. Once a garden raised falls below. One heart, one hand, your chains will fall away. Darkness grows when you're alone, but your mother lies below. She'll lift you up, electric through and through. All you children of the sea.
I like this.
I'm glad you like it.
I like it. It's good.
It's a fun one.
You know, I don't know if we ever played together when I was playing some stuff, Bird Beds. Maybe
Yeah.
at the time. I don't know, but it's, you know, back then I kind of, it was this, because what year did you start Buried Beds?
Like 2002, 2003.
So it's like right when I was leaving. So we probably didn't, but I remember, you know, kind of hearing it at the time, and you know, I was still pretty like, my musical tastes were a little more constricted, I think, and so now I hear that I'm like, oh yeah, great, it's so beautiful, like, you know, folk rock. I don't know if you want to call it folk rock, but folk rock and just beautiful like arrangements, and it's great stuff, you know, all the Buried Beds catalog.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I get that it didn't always appeal to all tastes, but I hoped that it was always good for what it was, you know?
Yeah.
I think, like, especially the first record we made was just painfully dark and brooding and slow. And I think at the end of that record, both Beaver and I were like, we got to write some jammers. Like, I can't go like a whole hour of just like,
yeah.
I mean, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I still look back on that first record and think like, it was really beautiful. Like, we made a beautiful thing, but I don't want to listen to it. It doesn't make me feel good to listen to.
Yeah, it's weird too when that things are based on if it does, inspiration comes from breakups and things, and you're just like in that headspace a lot.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I'm not that sad anymore. So.
I'm not that sad. Yeah, like this is all. I think also what was sort of interesting for us, and once we started, like that song we just listened to, "Children of the Sea," is my version of like a jammer. Like, it's really not that rock and roll, but for me, I'm like, yeah, it's totally like,
oh, it's a jam. I think that's a jammer.
It's super fun.
Like,
yeah,
it's epic. It's an epic big. It's a big epic sound.
It's a big sound. But I think like the sort of cohort that we came up with was Dr. Dog and the Teeth and National Eye and Raccoon, and it was just like a much dirtier rock and roll universe. And then like we'd be on the bill and be like, we have a cello player. Like, I'm going to this song will start off with a flute solo.
Yeah, a flute solo.
We only did that once. We only did the flute. We had the flautist just for the one show. But man, it was amazing. If I could have swung a flute player, I would have kept her around.
I know that's funny because like I think about that when I see a band put out an album with like just one maybe female voice on like the album, but it's really important, and I'm like, how do you? So tour? Are you just like that's it? You just have to? Is it every night you have? Or are they just coming for that one song or whatever? Yeah, so that was like the world you were in, the Philadelphia, and this is like, early 2000s, and then, just playing all these, the clubs, the usual spots, Khyber, North Star, and like what was your favorite spot to play, would you say, venue in Philly from that era?
I mean, like the first couple of years, like the dream spot was the North Star. That was like the spot that you worked your way up to.
Yeah, that was it.
And then as soon as Johnny Brenda's came on the scene, it was just like, why would we play shows anywhere but Johnny Brenda's? Like it didn't, so then you kind of have to, and then, there was Boot and Saddle, and there was other newer kind of clubs that came in where you were really excited to play them and kind of had to like pick what kind of vibe. We did some shows at Kung Fu Necktie, but
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was maybe not a great venue for Buried Buds, but
Yeah.
I think there were enough small clubs to really build a fan base,
Yeah.
where it's like you could start in a 100 cap room and work your way up to a 300 cap room, and like you could really make, I don't know, I feel like those first couple years, like I felt the momentum building, which is a fun feeling to feel
Yeah.
like, oh, like making this thing and we're growing as musicians and we're growing as artists, writers and performers, and like I could feel us getting better and being more commanding as musicians, which was super fun. And it was fun to have music. Like it was such a community of friends. Like I feel like still my best friends are those people, those sort
Yeah.
of like, the like Moving Insects and American Authors, these bands that don't exist.
Yes.
But like I sort of forged those friendships early on, and those are my closest friends. I love them.
That's so great. And it's so refreshing to hear,
Yeah.
especially when it's like, oh, the band broke up and now we hate each other. And
Yeah.
we're these disgusting people, bitter hearts.
Yeah.
So that was like, yeah, and you did some tours. Buried Beds was
Yeah.
like
Funny enough, our first like really important tour was with the band Me Without You,
yeah,
which are a, classic, infamous Philadelphia rock band, totally amazing.
yeah,
Great, great band, wonderful people, incredible live show. But it is like heavy. It is heavy music. And I remember being like, oh my God, like, what are people going to think when we're like doing our a cappella 4-part harmonies with the viola? But it was amazing. Like I felt like that was my first experience of thinking like, people like music. Like people on that Me Without You tour loved us. They loved our record. They loved we ended up doing a bunch of tours with them, and I think that's sort of what got us any tours at all, was just, I think, seeing like, oh, people will like, this is a good opener. So we toured with Kishibashi and Dr. Dog and Murder by Death. We were able to really build to the most like level 1 touring success.
yeah. Well, well, probably more than that, I'd say.
Yeah, but and that was amazing. Like getting to tour and come home from the tour with money in our pocket, and to feel like we had done a great job of being the opener or the 2 of 3.
Yes.
It felt really good and rewarding and fun, and I felt like you do just make such good friends. Those van tours, you either love each other or hate each other, and most often you just love each other. It's like summer camp. So you just come home from those tours really having fallen in love with everybody on every tour. You're in love with the front of house guy at the end of it. You're just like, I love everybody. It's so beautiful.
Oh, that's nice. And then again, it's so good that you guys are amicable. What year did you break up? What was the like?
Yeah, I
think
think
even official, or if
there was no official thing. It was around 2014.
Okay.
I think was when we kind of like just phased ourselves out. And that's a good, so it was like over 10 years that we were an active band that, was locally successful and got to do some national touring. But it was, I think it had run its course. I think there were some just like group dynamic stuff that happens in bands that started to be like less fun and not wanting to be locked into those things. And it's just hard to like redefine the boundaries of a relationship after they've been established. And so I think that was a piece of it. I think a piece of it was just like, you kind of feel like you've done what you needed to do. Certainly I started Buried Buds with my best friend Beaver, but my best friend Beaver is still my best friend Beaver. Like it wasn't like because a relationship ended and we hated each other,
Yeah.
Beaver at that point had joined Me Without You, which is a busy and successful nationally, internationally touring rock band. So, and I just really wanted to do something different. So I had taken a job doing an album cycle with Strand of Oaks. So I was playing with them. And so it really was this kind of phase out of like, we're not quitting, but also we're not going to make a new record and we're probably not going to tour anymore.
Yeah. Which just means...
Yeah, it means you're not a band anymore.
Yeah, but not having to define. Well, it's nice not having to define it, and just
and it wasn't like we didn't talk about it, but it was sort of like I think we both felt good supporting each other to try something else.
And this is when you started to try other things. You started to join up with some of these, some bigger bands or like touring bands and stuff. Like, so Strand of Oaks, that was the first entryway.
That was my first. Yeah, that was my first entryway. It wasn't the best for me. But,
yes. How do we talk about these things? So...
I think that people are complicated, and I think that
that's good.
There are lots of things I remember about that tour that were incredibly fun and really formative of what it meant for me to be a side person. Having gone from like being a band leader to being a side person, that is a big shift. And I look back really fondly at a lot of it. And then there's some stuff where it's like, oh, that was a boundary for me. And I feel proud of myself for knowing that, for knowing like, this is my line that I am not willing to cross.
Yeah.
And feeling good about saying like, I don't want to do this,
I'm not doing a show topless.
Nobody ever asked me to do a show topless.
No, I know that. But it's like, I think that's so great because you probably learned a lot about, that inform these future things that you've been involved with. And it's like, what a great learning opportunity, when you're, you don't just know at first. It's like,
Yeah. And even with that crew, like I talked to all of them, Mike and Devin and Tim, like I literally talk to all of them still. So it is a thing of like, even though that wasn't the best fit for me, it was still like, there was still a lot that happened in that year that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I was there for that. I'm so glad that this was like part of my story. And then from there I joined up with Grace Potter, and that was just like a wholly different experience.
Yeah. So what with Grace, I've seen Grace live when she came to Tucson. I know you. So this has been obviously this year's quiet on that front, but that was like 6 years so far. Like 6 years of touring and playing with her. Yeah.
I mean, so I did about 2 years with her, and then like a year and a half with Iron and Wine. But even in that Iron and Wine year, I would fly out for one-off shows with her. So I do feel like I've been with her for a long time now.
And with these projects, we're talking, just so folks know too, is keyboard, piano, vocal arrangements, harmonies.
Mm-hmm.
Just like
I play a little guitar in the Grace band and a little mandolin in the Iron and Wine band.
Okay.
So, but mostly keys and vocals is why I'm not there to play the guitar. I'm there to play keys and sing.
Yeah.
But I can play a little guitar if they need me to.
Well, how was it then getting the difference then to go into like the Grace Potter world? And how did that happen?
Oh my gosh. It happened in the weirdest way where I had recently left Strand of Oaks and was kind of like, that's fine. Like I have this solo record I want to make, so I can focus on that. And I woke up at like 3 a.m. and I had a text from my good friend, Charlie Hall, who is the drummer for the War on Drugs. And he said, I just got you a job. And it's like 3 a.m. I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, I'm just going to text him back in the morning. And I texted him back and I was like, I don't want a job. And he was like, you want this job. So he called me and he was like, listen, I was out in California and I ended up having cocktails with Grace Potter. And I guess Charlie knew Grace's sister, who's a really amazing, accomplished artist. She's a glass artist. She makes
Oh.
like glass playing stuff, and she ran the Chrysler Museum in Virginia. She's incredible,
Wow.
amazing. Charlotte Potter, really, really impressive woman. He knew Charlotte, and so when he was out in California, I guess Charlotte was in town, and she was like, "Oh, you should come and have cocktails with me and my sister Grace." And obviously Charlie knew who Grace Potter was, but they had not been friends. They ended up having cocktails, and Charlie just sort of ended up convincing Grace that she should hire me. And Grace had already had auditions, and so Grace had always been Grace Potter in the Nocturnals. This was the point in her life and career where that shift had happened. So the Nocturnals had broken up. She was going off as a solo artist. She just finished this new record, Midnight. So she had had auditions, hired an entirely new band, had hoped to have found a woman to be in the band, but nobody who auditioned was right. So the rehearsals were already happening. So like basically Grace called me, and I guess she had like gotten Scott McMicken from Dr. Dog. Like she knew him, and she wrote him and was like, "What do you think about this Eliza woman?" And he wrote her an email about how I was like a pink glitter box that everybody needed in their life, which is so sweet. So I just had these like two, it's all who you know, I had these two really accomplished pro dudes just sort of say to her, like, "You want her in your band." And so she basically just like made room for me in her band.
Dude.
And I showed up halfway through rehearsals. Everybody had already met and was practicing and playing. And I was just like, here I am. Like, what do I, and there was already a keyboard player.
Oh.
And he is, and I am saying this like in all honesty, so much better than me at the keyboards.
Wow.
He was Dr. John's organ player.
Oh.
Like if you are Dr. John's organ player, you're very, very good at the organ. And like he's from New Orleans. Like and Grace's music is very sort of like roots rock, blues, Americana, rock and roll vibe. That is not my style of music.
Right.
So T. Ben Alleman, who's a super accomplished keyboard player, had already been hired as the keyboard player. So I like showed up with my Nord like, "Hey buddy, let's split it." But what ended up working out great was this new Grace record was a departure from that roots rock and was just a pop record. It was an absolute pop record. So it had all these synths and vocal layers, and I was like, I can do that. So I was like, you do all of the organ solos and I'll build all of these synth patches and we'll kind of break it up that way. So it ended up being awesome. And I do think she made a good choice in hiring me.
Yes. Oh yeah. I think so.
Yeah. And that was great. It was my first bus tour. It was my first show I played with her, which was like 3 days after I met her, was in Vegas with Penn and Teller.
Oh my God.
And I was completely faking it. I was pretending like I knew what I was doing. I was pretending like I was confident. I had no idea. Like I knew half of the songs. I did not know what was going on. I was like, I got this. She was like, if you don't know what to do, just dance. I was like, I can do that. I will dance. I will totally dance. And I did. There were whole songs where I just danced. And then our second show was opening for the Rolling Stones at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium in front of 90,000 people.
The second show.
The second show.
Oh, man.
So I really went from like sleeping on the floor of a van to playing with the Rolling Stones in a very, very short little period of time. And I faked my way through. I faked it.
Start doing the Mick Jagger chicken dance for the thing.
I was very easy going.
Yeah.
I didn't did not make any waves.
Yep.
I played a mean tambourine.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you just needed time to like learn the stuff, which you did, and it was just getting in. You got in, which is so cool. And did you meet the Stones on that?
No, I did not meet the Stones, but Grace definitely did. And Grace had an assistant at the time, a long-term assistant, Allison Tavel, who is also a complete genius and totally amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I have learned so much from about like literally how to fake your way into incredible, not fake, but to like confidence your way into the life you want.
That's
and
great.
Allison just like became friends with Mick Jagger, where like a couple of weeks later she was like, I had dinner with Mick last night, it was so fun. And I'm like, how is this happening?
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
Great.
So they hung out with some of the Rolling Stones. I kept my mouth shut and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I was on time and professional and I played all the right notes, and
Yeah.
I did not try to meet anybody.
But you have since. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
there's been you told me a story you met about Jackson Brown.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was really, really amazing. So Grace has her own festival that she throws in Vermont every year called Grand Point North. And last year it was canceled because of COVID, but the year before, so it's a 2-day festival and she always headlines it, but then there's always like a headliner who plays before us. So the year before, the headliner on the first night had been Jackson Brown. And because it's a small festival, he played it as a duo. So he, played some of his old songs and had a friend play. But then for the encore, Grace had talked to Jackson about us being his backing band so that he could, play the big hits.
Yeah.
Like Doctor My Eyes and, like the seminal Jackson Brown bangers.
Yeah.
He would be able to have a full band. And so we were the band, but I was on tour with Iron and Wine when she did the rehearsals with Jackson Brown. So I didn't go to the rehearsals. So I showed up at the show and I was like, "Hi, Jackson, I'm so excited to play for you." He was like, "Where were you during rehearsals?" Like, "You're too important to show up to a Jackson Brown rehearsal." And I was like, "I'm so sorry. I promise." Like,
I was just too busy.
I've got it. Like, I'm gonna nail those piano licks on Doctor My Eyes. And he watched basically the entire festival, which headliners don't do. You don't show up at 3 p.m. so that you can see the local band play. And he watched almost the entire festival. He watched our entire set. He had so much fun. And then, we did the encore with him, and Kenny Chesney came out and sang a verse of one of Jackson's songs. It's like Jackson and Kenny Chesney sharing a mic. It was so sweet and so fun. And then the next day, Jackson called Grace. So it's a 2-day festival. It's a different headliner the second night. I think the headliner the second night was Nathaniel Ratcliffe and the Night Sweats.
Oh.
He called Grace and he goes, "I know that I'm not supposed to be there today, but I had so much fun yesterday and I'd really love to see Nathaniel Ratcliffe. Do you think I could come again?" Tonight? We were like, "Yeah, you can. You are Jackson Brown. You can do whatever you want." And he was like, I would love it so much. And like, I don't need to do anything. She was like, "Do you want to sing something tonight?" He was like, "Oh, I would love to sing this song with you. Like, I want to sing one of your songs." He was just so genuinely excited to experience music and to experience new music. It wasn't just like, I want to see the music that I already like. Like, he was watching these like young bands doing cool, fucked up shit.
Yeah.
And just being like, "I love this. I love what's happening right now." And he's super into quilts. So we talked a lot about quilts afterwards. And he was just like a truly genuine human who loves music and loves playing music and loves watching music. And I just think you don't see that in a lot of legacy artists, people who are sort of like, "This is my job, but I've grown cold to it." Like, he has not grown cold.
That's really inspiring. It's like, I want to take a note from his book, Jackson Brown's book.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be like that when I get old, be like closed off to everying. Just let it in.
Yeah. Yeah. That felt really good. And I think Jackson Brown is incredible, but it's not like I was like, "Oh my God, I can't wait to meet Jackson Brown." But then after I met him, I was like, "He's the best."
Yeah.
Why didn't I should have been so excited. But I think you get used to the idea that it's like people who've been doing it for decades and decades are not necessarily the most fun.
Right. Yeah.
But he really was. It was beautiful. And it really was inspiring to be like, man, I hope that when I'm in my 70s, I'm just like psyched to watch music and to play music with my friends and to like throw down with a pickup band to play my hits, like, which involves a lot of trust. And, he was very, very cool.
That's amazing, dude.
Yeah.
It's so cool. So you said you were rehearsing, you missed that rehearsal with Iron and Wine. How did the Iron and Wine happen? How did you get involved? Yeah.
So the Iron and Wine thing was also interesting. I guess they had again, already hired a band. But I think the woman that they had in mind to sing and play keys, I think she was pregnant, and the way that the touring was going to work out, she sort of had to back out, where she was like, honestly, like, it doesn't really make sense. Because when you sign on to do a tour, you're really signing on for at least a year on the road.
Yeah.
And potentially longer than that. And she, already, I think a few months into her pregnancy was like, I can't do that. It just won't work out. So they had reached out to Natalie Press, who's an amazing singer and songwriter and musician. And she was like, no, I'm not a side woman. Like, I'm Natalie Press. But she said, but you should talk to this woman, Eliza, because she's a great side woman. And so I got a text message from Iron and Wine's manager, Howard, that was like, this is Howard from Iron and Wine. Would you be interested in touring with the band? If so, call me back. And I was like, what is happening? What is this text message? And so, Howard and I talked on the phone, and he was like, yeah, well, why don't you just send me some videos and, whatever records you have. And we'll talk next week. And I was like, I would love to talk to you next week, but I'm going to be in Russia. And he was like, why are you going to be? And I was like, well, I'm doing this artist residency for my quilt project in the Arctic. So I don't even know if I'm going to have internet access because I'm going to be up in the Arctic Circle. But I can call you as soon as I get home. But I think that helped, honestly.
Yeah, he's like, she's going to the Arctic Circle to work with the quilt project that involves music.
Yeah.
Well, that did it.
Knowing Sam, who is Iron and Wine, is Sam Beam, knowing him well the way I do now, he's an artist, he's a painter, and he actually is very into quilts. So I think it was probably like, here's this woman who's good at the piano and can sing and also is into the weird art that you're into. And I think Sam was like, great, she's hired.
Yeah.
Fly her out,
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. And so that was, you just got to, great. It's like you get these calls, the texts, and then it's just like the person's like, there's Eliza. It's, you're in the loop,
I'm in the loop. Yeah. And I've just been super lucky is the thing. And I think, there are benefits to being a member in a band, because you just know what your life is, the cycles of touring and recording. And when you are a side woman, you have no security. Like, Grace could decide that the next version of her band is going to be a brass band, and then she wouldn't need me, and Sam could decide that, what he really wants to do is to do a fully electric thing, and he just wants to have and both of those artists kind of do that. They sort of reimagine what their bands are going to be and what the arrangements are going to be. So I really have no idea when I work. But then when you get hired, you're like, okay, cool, I've got a year and a half of work here.
Right.
So I don't have to worry now. And then in between, I've just sort of gotten used to the idea that it'll work out. Something will come up.
That's a good place to be, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I totally understand, and on a smaller level with some of the acting stuff I've had, it's just like, I'm just gonna trust this, and it's gonna be big gaps where it's not happening, and I think that's just what happens for in that world of the actors, musicians, artists, where you just know. You just have to put some trust into it, and just know that it will work out,
Yeah.
It all will be revealed, and it will be provided. With and Iron and Wine, you toured a lot. You toured a bunch for a year?
Yeah, a year and a half with Sam and the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved that.
And then, what's that?
I loved it. It was so great. Yeah.
Was it? And where was maybe some of your favorite spots? Are there with all these tours? Just between. I know there's those Grace Potter, Iron Wine, two different worlds for that.
Really different worlds. Very very different vibes.
Yeah.
For the different every tour has sort of its own like little mini tour culture.
Yeah.
But even the audiences were different, the venues were different, the festivals were different. So it was kind of fun to not feel like I was just like running in the same circle over and over again.
Yes.
With Grace on her, the first record I toured with her, Midnight, was the last record that she did with Hollywood Records, and they only put out her records in the States. So we did like 18 solid months of touring, just US, and
wow.
and like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, but really just hitting absolutely every market in the States.
Yeah.
And that is really like, she can do that. She can just hit, every market in the States. Her music is so sort of palatable. It's so fun and joyful. And I think it resonates with a lot of different kinds of people. So you can really, she has a huge market in the States. With Iron and Wine, I think it's a more niche sort of musical tasting, but it's so beautiful again that like, I think a lot of people love Iron and Wine because of the place that it holds in their life, like the kinds of feelings that it gives and when they've listened to those records and what those records mean to them. But with Iron and Wine, we did Asia and Australia and Europe. And so that was really fun. Like I definitely, my first Asia tour was, I guess 2 years ago now with Iron and Wine. It was, just wildly, wildly fun.
Yeah. Totally a lot different than the States, or like playing
very, very different.
Yeah.
Very different. In some ways it's, touring anywhere is touring anywhere. You're in the van or you're in the bus, you wake up, you play the show. In Asia, you play the show, you go to the airport, you fly, you play the show, you go to the airport, you fly. So it's a lot more grueling. Yeah. Because you're really flying every day, and flying is, it takes it out of you. Yeah, and on the bus, you're in a bed, you're sleeping. Right. On the airplane, it's like you're desperately trying to sleep, but maybe not always succeeding.
That's wild.
So kind of a different vibe. But I love, especially on the European tours, because the towns are close to each other. You end up having kind of short drives and lots of time to explore. So I went to like a lot of operas and classical music concerts and dance performances on days off. And it was lots of, art museums and stuff. So I feel like it's a great way to see a tiny piece of every city.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's don't get me wrong, but with touring, it is grueling travel, but then there's chunks where you just sit around, like hurry up and wait. Yeah. And then just you can go and check some stuff out and like have like mini vacation sort of.
Yeah. And I'm a runner. And so that's sort of like built into it too, is like I wake up in the morning fairly early. I try to wake up before most folks do. And then I'll like run to the Milan Cathedral or run to the Berlin. So I'm sort of doing like jog tourism where I'm like, I'm getting my mental health exercise. I'm also checking out the Milan Cathedral, and then I'll be back in time for load-in,
Love it. What a great thing to do. It's so awesome. I'm so happy you've been able to do all this, and we'll continue to. Yeah.
Hopefully when this is back on the road. Yeah.
Back on the road, man. I wanted to jump back for a moment to your solo record that came out. When did this come out? The from the record
Because Become. Yeah. It came out in January of 2016.
Yes, January 2016. Okay. Here, we could talk a little bit. Let me play a little.
Lighthouse burns, but calls no boats to home. His body bends, becomes the wind and snow. Question
this album?
I recorded this album between two studios. So I did half of it at Minor Street Records with Brian McTeer.
Right.
And then I did half of it with Nick Prill at Mount Slippery, which is the Dr. Dog studio.
Nice.
Yeah. And I recorded the whole record in between tours. So I would be on the road I started it when I was on the road with Strand of Oaks, and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to be home for 3 weeks. I'm going to book 4 days in the studio in that time. And then I'd go back on the road, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to be on the road for 2.5 months, and then I'll be home. So I'll book another 3 days. So I was just booking these little pockets of time between these two studios with different groups of people. So different drummers, different guitar players, just being like, hey, can you come into the studio on this day?
Yeah.
And it was so fun. I just think it's the most fun I've ever had making a record. And I think part of it was I didn't spend a lot of time in my home studio tinkering. I would just go in with people that I trusted, and we would record stuff. And then I'd be like, I love that. That sounds great. Let's move on. Instead of being like, okay, yeah, but let's try 7 different guitar lines. And then switch back and forth. It was just like, no, that sounds great. Like, we only have a day here. So we're going with this, and we're moving on now. And it didn't feel like a desperate kind of settling. It felt like you were just capturing a moment in time, and that to fuck with that moment in time would have been a horrible mistake. And so it was just, the whole thing was like, I had the moments of reflection on then I'd be on tour for a month, so I could listen to the mix for 100 different times, but I didn't have a recording set up. So I wasn't tinkering. I was just thinking and brooding. And then I could come back and be like, okay, I've got, today in the studio, we're going to do these 4 things. We're going to make this happen. And so it was just a super fun way to make a record. I loved it. I wish I could make every record like that.
It's so wonderful. It's a great record. I'll have links to everything that you've done on when this show comes out, so people can get that, and it's great. It's really nice. Again,
Thanks.
Just the soundscapes, the arrangements, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
And that song that we just listened to, Weatherman, is a really fun song because there's also a wild, the universe is magical story that goes along with it.
Please, because I asked you about that before. I was like, what song from the album? You said that one. So yeah, please, I'd love to.
So I wrote that song probably in 2015 at some point, about a photo essay that was in the New Yorker called The Weatherman. And it was about this Russian Arctic weatherman who basically manned a lighthouse weather station in the Arctic Circle. And he would spend months at a time. And so up in the Arctic Circle, you have polar night. So he would spend months at a time in total darkness, completely alone in a lighthouse with a radio tower, just recording weather data. And this photo essay is so beautiful. And so the photographer is just a genius. I mean, it was so evocative. It just made you feel so many feelings. And there was very little description. There was just sort of this one little paragraph at the beginning where the photographer talks about loneliness and how the weatherman said that he didn't feel lonely because he became the wind and the sea.
Oh.
So he felt oneness with the universe. So he never felt like he was alone, because not I had the wind as my company, but I am the wind, I am the sea. I just thought was really beautiful. And so I wrote this song because I am definitely a person who, as an extrovert, I experience loneliness in a very extreme way.
Yeah, right.
So I was what an interesting life. And I knew he had a wife that he would see in between, and that felt like touring, where it's you have this sort of these dual things going on. So then 2 years later, I was in the Russian Arctic doing this artist residency. And the way that had come about was I'd put my record out, and a painter from Murmansk, which is up in the Arctic Circle, had written me on Facebook and said, I heard your music on Russian Facebook and I really liked it. And I'm doing this painting exhibition, and could I use your music for my exhibition? And I, thought, oh, how amazing. The internet's so cool.
Yeah.
Fuck the Luddites,
Yes. Yes.
Totally. And then ended up talking to the woman who was hosting the exhibition. She runs something called the Arctic Art Foundation. We talked a lot about quilts and folk songs and textiles. And she had eventually said, like, if you come up with a cool project, we'll host a residency for you. So I'd come up with this Song Quilts project where I was going to interview women, record them singing folk songs from the American South and the Russian North, and then I invented a method of transcribing music into color and shape, and then I was making quilts out of these things.
Oh, it's so cool.
So I was up in Arkhangelsk, which is a major port city up on the Barents Sea. And one of the things that I did in my residency was I taught a class at the Arkhangelsk Music College. And the professor who was my host at the Arkhangelsk Music College had then also set up a performance. And I had taught a class about American folk music. So what are the elements of American folk music? Because it's to music students, so it was very nerdy. Mm-hmm. But then I had also taught these students King Kong Kitschy Kaimio and 9 Pound Hammer and Canaan's Land. I'd sort of taught them some really traditional American folk music. And then we were going to do a performance at a local cafe. And Anna Akimova, the professor, had said, but I want to sing a song with you. And I said, great. And I said, what song do you want to sing? She says, no, I want you to play your music. And I said, yeah, well, I have all this American folk music. She's like, no, I want you to play your music. And I want to sing one of the songs with you. And I said, oh, what song do you want to sing with me? And she said, I just really love the song Weatherman. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting, because I wrote it about a Russian. And she was like, no, not a Russian song, your song. Because she speaks very little English. I speak no Russian. So I'm talking to her through my phone translator. She's, speaks very clear English, but, it's a second language. It's not perfect. So there was sort of this misunderstanding. And so I brought up the photo essay and I said, no, I wrote it about this man. And she knew him.
Oh my gosh.
He lives in Arkhangelsk. He lives in the town. She was like, oh my gosh, Vasily, yes. We know him. He's off at the weather station now, but his wife lives here. Let me call his wife and see if she can come to the show.
Oh my gosh.
This is in this world of loneliness and isolation, to have this moment of this woman who this song resonated with her, and she didn't know what it was about. And it was no, I wrote this song about your land, what it means to be in this Arctic space and this darkness. And the woman the wife did not come to the show, but Anna translated the song into Russian. And so we sang it in this sort of English-Russian duet about loneliness, but it's the opposite of loneliness.
Right. That is gorgeous.
Isn't that a fun story?
That is beautiful.
The universe is magical.
That is so magical. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I just
think
it's so funny to me to have written a song about a place that I didn't even think to look at on a map. I didn't even think. I just thought it's in the Russian Arctic somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is years before I then just end up in the Russian Arctic in this place.
And the universe provides. I love it.
Yeah. Very fun.
That is so good. That is so sweet. I love that story. Oh my gosh. No.
It's very mystical.
It
it's
is mystical.
alley.
It's right up my It's right up my alley. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I've been taking some time here. I love the time that we've been having here, and I'd love to have you come back on and do another show. So promise me now on record that you will do that.
I'll be back.
Okay, I'll be back. Well, before we fully sign off, I have 2 more questions for you. I'd just like to do this at the end of the shows. Mm-hmm. Which I'm totally also realizing we haven't even talked about our Tom Cruise
oh boy.
infatuation.
We can just do the next episode can be 100% Tom Cruise.
Maybe it will be. Yeah. And it could just be convincing the world why Tom Cruise is awesome.
Yeah, I'm an evangelist. I'm a Tom
Yes.
Cruise evangelist.
Yeah, I think I have converted some people in our dealings, and
Yeah.
some of in my encounters with folks who are very resistant, and then they start to open up. And I think they get it now. But
And let the joy in. It's you got to let it in.
so this first question could possibly deal with Tom Cruise. Is what is your favorite movie of all time?
My favorite movie of all time is The Sound of Music.
Okay, so we'll keep Cruise out of that one.
Yeah.
But that is great. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It was my favorite movie because I had seen it more than any other movie. I loved it so much growing up. And then when they started doing the remasters and releasing stuff in the theater, I saw it on the big screen in the theater.
Oh, wow.
And it is a masterpiece. Not just I love musicals and I love Julie Andrews and that's, it's a great score.
Yeah.
As a film, it is a cinematic masterpiece. It is such a great movie.
I agree with you. I know Amanda loves it, and I think it was a couple years ago we watched it. It's they played around New Year's or something, and so we just caught it watching, and it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous,
It's so beautiful
movie, and I'll be excited to share that with my little one when she's old enough to understand. And just actually, to be honest, she's already been exposed. Is a year ago playing. These are a few of my favorite things.
Great song.
And she loves it. So that gets put on every so often. And we haven't heard it for a while. But so Sound of Music, awesome. And then what was your favorite toy growing up? Did you have a favorite toy?
My favorite toy growing up.
This could be also it could be bigger than just for instance, one of my guests, it was a teddy bear. So
yeah, I had anthropomorphic guilt as a child. So it's funny that you asked that question because even as a child, I felt incredible guilt if I favored certain toys over other toys.
Yeah.
And even blankets, if I didn't have my tulip blanket on, I felt like the tulip blanket would feel that I had snubbed her,
Yes.
And so I had not every toy made it into the anthropomorphic guilt, but I had a fluffy bear. I had a stuffed porcupine named Nucci, which I thought I was naming it Nietzsche, but I misheard the word Nietzsche. His name was Nucci Gus Spoke Zarathustra.
Whoa.
Which is not Gus. Gus Spoke Zarathustra with Nucci. And my parents just didn't correct me because it's ridiculous to have a child named Porcupine Nietzsche. So I had Fluffy, Angel, and Nucci, where the toys were if it was oh, well, you could bring a toy to your Nana's house, I would have I'd cry "Ooh, Angel's gonna feel left out." So then I would leave them all together so that they could keep each other company.
Aww, that's so sweet. They needed to hang out, and especially with Nucci, who is having an existential crisis
at all times. He had a rough go.
Oh man, that's good.
Yeah.
And then is there anywhere that you want to direct people towards? Like I said, I'm gonna have links up for folks of all your music, but I'm just, if there's anything, and your quilt project and
I mean my website, which is just my name, elizahardyjones.com, has the quilt project and the music stuff. There was a recent marrying of all those things. I did a Weather Vane episode at Minor Street Studios where I talk about my quilts and my family and my music and write a song and record a song, and my dad's in it. So that's sort of a fun, recent thing.
Was that, have I seen that about the history of the house that was up? Yeah, that is fantastic. So and that's on your website.
Yes.
So that'll be a good place to just point people towards, because get to see all the wonderful things of Eliza Hardy Jones that they need to see and discover, listen and see. And wow, Eliza, yay.
Thanks for having me, Bradford.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, feel free to edit out any one of these very long stories.
Well, hold on. We'll just That's nice you said that. We'll have that on the record, but I don't want to, because they're all so good. I want people to hear it for what it is. Yeah.
Great.
All right. Take
All
care.
right. You
See you
too.
soon.
Bye.
Yippee, yippee, yippee. Fun times. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's how we do it. Another great talking to Eliza. So much fun. I didn't know some of these stories about her past. And I just love hearing about the times, her music career, where it's taken her. And I'm proud of my friends. I am. I'm like really, I rejoice in, just keep this in mind. I don't always feel this way, but right now, in this moment, I like fully rejoice in hearing success of others, friends of mine. I mean, I'm happy for other people I don't know, but like, specifically, it's like, I just get so like proud of hearing what some of my friends have done in life. And Eliza is a shining example of that. We did not get to talk as much about our Tom Cruise infatuation. Like I said, we might just have to do another whole episode on that, or like, a bonus episode. I'm trying to do these like bonus episodes. I think that'll be something. There'll be something to that where it's just kind of like quick standalone, just a little beat bop bork, just plop it out. Plop it out the old podcaster, the rear of the podcaster. Just dump out a bonus episode. But man, super fun. Yeah, gosh. And my daughter loves the quilt that Eliza made her. She's sleeping with it right now, I think, as I'm recording this. This outro. Jeez. So much fun stuff. So yeah, make sure you check out all her music. She's got quite a repertoire and back catalog of the Buried Beds and her solo stuff, and just go check out some live YouTube stuff and things. It's great. All right, people. Power to the people. Right on.
May all your wishes come true.